welcome back to this already, the final segment of today's Price of Business, and I am your host, Kevin Price, talking to you about you and your business. Always delighted to have my friend on, Brian Domitrovic. He is an economic historian at Sam Houston State University and a writer for Forbes magazine, and we always have a good time whenever you're on. I get to get geekish whenever you get on, and I always like that. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great, Kevin. How are you?
Good. Tell us a little bit about your background and the work you do.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, I'm a PhD in economic history, and I write books on the history of the supply-side revolution. I mean, I was just at Arthur Laffer's place the other day. Larry Kudlow and I are writing a book on the influence of the John F. Kennedy tax cut on Ronald Reagan. And, just 2 weeks ago, I met with Janet Yellen. I don't know if I told you that. I was one of the conservatives who met with her in Washington, to talk about monetary policy from our perspective.
Mm-hmm. And how'd that go?
Yeah, I think it went pretty well. She met with us for an hour, and, we laid out our views, and there's no question she absorbed them. I mean, I think she understands where we're coming from in terms of things like the gold standard, fixed exchange rates, and the kind of classical monetary policy that we've really departed from in this time of slow economic growth.
Yeah, no question about it. So, her background, I think she has a PhD in economics, doesn't she?
Yeah, she's a professor at Berkeley, and she's married to a Nobel Prize winner, George Akerlof, who funny, was actually a classmate in college at Yale of Arthur Laffer. So, the supply-side revolution and the Keynesian revolution were right next to each other as undergraduates there. And so, then she was chairman of Bill Clinton's Council of Economic Advisors, and now she's Bernanke's successor at the Fed.
Yeah, very interesting. So tell me a little bit about what you got going on with your book project.
Yeah, so, come January, right before the primary season, Penguin will put out JFK and the Reagan Revolution. That's the book that Larry Kudlow and I are writing about the JFK tax cut. And the thing is, in the early 1960s, we had really slow economic growth. And it's because the marginal rate of the income tax was 91%. That's 100 minus 9. Hard to believe it was that high. And John F. Kennedy just said, look, I mean, there's no way we're going to have job creation if we really nail investors high incomes with that kind of tax cut. This is a Democrat saying that, and the Republicans opposed him. Donald Rumsfeld voted against that tax cut in Congress.
Yeah, Barry Goldwater called it fiscally irresponsible.
Yeah, absolutely. Gerald Ford voted against it, and the people who voted for it were Tip O'Neill and Dan Rostenkowski and all these Democrats. They said we have to unlock the rich people's capital. This is what they were saying in the early 1960s. Kennedy got it done. We had a huge decade of growth in the 60s.
Yeah. John F. Kennedy noted with saying a rising tide lifts all boats. When he said that, he was talking about the purpose behind a tax cut.
Yeah, and that was Democratic Party orthodoxy. And it took Ronald Reagan to absorb that into the Republican Party. And we really should be living in an era of bipartisanship on low and simple taxation at this point in time. It is a real shame that the Democrats abandoned their tax cut history just because Ronald Reagan took it up in the 1980s.
Yeah, it's a tragedy, actually. So your book, and you expect that to come out in January. Do you hope it ends up becoming a player in the whole political process?
Well, yeah. I mean, let me assure you, these supply-siders like Larry and Arthur Laffer are meeting with all the candidates. I mean, they're meeting with everyone from Ben Carson to Carly Fiorina to Scott Walker, everything else. I mean, so all the Republican primary hopefuls understand that they must have the endorsements of the original supply-siders, because if you're not a supply-side Republican, why are you running in the primary, really? So, no, I mean, we expect it to have some effect, yes.
Yeah, and are you working towards some kind of access to these candidates?
Yeah, no, we're meeting with them. Yeah, I mean, I've met a number of them so far, and Larry and our Laffer meet with them all the time. And let me tell you, one thing we're concerned about is this idea that we should raise exemptions. This is the Marco Rubio. This is the Rubio-Lee suggestion. We should raise exemptions and keep the marginal tax rate pretty high, like 35%. We think that's a little dangerous. It's best to keep that rate as low as possible and the base as broad as possible.
Yeah, and it seems like to me in the 21st century, You know, you and I have had this conversation before. You know, the ability for us to move capital, the ability for us to even change our residence for business purposes. You know, you saw what happened with Gordon Brown the last few days of his administration, where he put a massive tax increase on the top 1% in that country, and almost half of those taxpayers moved to Eastern Europe for tax purposes. You know, and the revenue, it created a revenue shortage. It would seem now in the 21st century that it's foregone that countries need to have a business attitude in terms of competitiveness with taxation.
Well, in Europe, the countries are smaller, and there is tax tourism all over the place. I mean, if you're Hollande or whoever in Europe putting up a 75% marginal tax rate on high incomes, people just move next door. We see this in a different form in the States, in the United States. I mean, one of the reasons for Texas's famous job growth is all the investment pushing into this state because of no income tax. California with its 13% income tax. So, I mean, this has been well known for decades, if not centuries. So it's time that the political establishment really absorbs it and acknowledges it.
Yeah, no question about it. No question about it. Well, I'm excited about the book. Tell us about some of the works you already have underneath your belt. I know, and you have one that's relatively new as is.
Yeah, just in October, Arthur Laffer and I published a book called The Pillars of Reaganomics. And what that is a 10-essay collection of things that Arthur Laffer and his staff wrote over the last 35 years, so beginning in 1980. And what we show in that book is that the supply-siders weren't really ever wrong. They basically called everything. You know, people call supply-side economics voodoo economics. They're not real economists. Well, here's the documentary record of what they said at every juncture before the Reagan Revolution and through it. And we want to just kind of throw the gauntlet down. Here's the real sources. Turned out pretty well, didn't it?
Yeah, it really did. Really did. Great story. Always great having you on. We got you on really short notice, and I'm grateful we did. Thanks so much, Brian Domitrovic.
Great, Kevin.
Yeah, best website for people to learn more about you.
BrianDomitrovic.com.
Sounds good. Thank you, sir. All right, when we come back, much more for you. I do want to remind you, best content here does show up over there at usdailyreview.com. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Spend it wisely right here on this station.